Hi everyone, welcome to today's video, which is going to be super special because we're celebrating 4,000 subscribers on this channel with a Q&A. I wanted to give a huge thank you to everybody who subscribed to this channel, who supported this channel. It still amazes me that something that I started when I was like in grade 10 has blown up in such an astronomical way for me, especially in the last year. We've grown about 3,000 subscribers. I genuinely couldn't be doing this without you, and I'm so excited to reach more milestones with you guys as my viewers. I'm so lucky to have such a beautiful audience. So thank you for being here, for subscribing. So let's jump into the questions. What's your ultimate piece of writing advice if you could only give one answer? I know they said one answer, but I have two. The first one is a bit of a non-answer, but actually my most recommended piece of writing advice, and it's to kind of null and void all writing advice and just to enjoy writing vicariously and just enjoy the process. When you enjoy something, improvement will follow. So really, it's like, don't listen to writing advice. And I know that I give writing advice on this channel, and it's not that I'm saying all writing advice is bad. I just think, especially if you are just starting out, what matters most is that you are writing. And so if anything gets in the way of that, if you're not sure if you're doing something right, don't worry about it. Just write what you want, and that's the best way I think you can get better at writing. The other piece of advice is actually a piece of advice, and that is learn how to finish stuff. I think this is one of the most important things you can learn as a writer because it teaches you commitment, and commitment is the first step to improvement because it encourages practice. And so my main advice for all writers, no matter where you're at in your stage of writing, whether you just started out, if you're writing for 10 years, it's to practice. And the best way to do that is to commit yourself to finishing something, whether it's like one short story or whether that's a novel. Finishing something can actually be a really great way to amplify you into continuing your writing journey. Who are your characters? How do you make them different from each other / develop them? First, let's get into who are your characters. So if you've been following me for a while, I have been working on this series for the last 7 years called Fostered. It follows an array of characters, but there are 4 main ones that keep popping up. It's Harrison, Lonan, Reeve, and Foster. All 4 of them appear throughout the series. I'm currently working on 2 separate series within that series. They're both spin-offs. The first one is called Feeding Habits, which is an adult literary fiction novel. It's really central on just 2 characters, which is Lonan and Harrison. And then I'm also working on an adult fantasy novel, which is called Seventh Virtue, and all 4 of them are really integral to the books themselves. I don't know how old they are, but I'm going to guess. So in Feeding Habits, Harrison and Lonan, I think, are 22. Reeve is 20 and Foster's 21. In Seventh Virtue, I think Harrison and Lonan are 25. Reeve would be like 23 or 22, and then Foster is like 24. I don't know. I'm bad at ages, but that's who they are. How do I make them different from each other and develop them? Characterization is all laden in empathy. So when you are approaching a character, sometimes they're going to do things that are not in line with your moral code. Sometimes they are going to do things that you would not do, or they will do things that you would do. It's a constant pull and push between you and your character. If you are writing human characters, humans are so messy. They are so contradictory. I think the more contradictions you have, the more human they can be. If my character's feeling flat, I might need to dig a little deeper into their psychology. What contradicts, what doesn't, what differs from mine. I also like to recognize when I'm writing with my characters that I'm constantly learning about them. I think when I was younger, I was like, okay, I know everything. But now that I'm a little bit older, I realize I absolutely have no idea what I'm doing. I barely know these people despite having written with them for almost a decade, and I will constantly be learning about them. My perception of them year to year will change and grow, and allowing room for that change, allowing room for that growth is really important. There are things that I've learned about Harrison, for example, writing Feeding Habits, that I didn't know when I was writing the main series way back when. Like when I was writing book 1 of like Fostered, that book, things I didn't know about him have been revealed to me in Feeding Habits. Same thing with Seventh Virtue. Even though I'm writing Seventh Virtue and Feeding Habits at the same time, I learned things about Harrison in Seventh Virtue that have never shown up in Feeding Habits, and they really inform each other. So I must leave room in my process to allow these characters to change, essentially. How do your characters feel about their presence in your book so far? Obviously, I'm working on both Feeding Habits and Seventh Virtue right now, which is kind of confusing because they're the same characters but different books. So in Seventh Virtue, Harrison, who's the narrator, is just straight up millennial panic. I just want to lie on my bed and watch Netflix and never leave ever again. Foster, on the other hand, is tired and also ready to retire into gardening for the rest of his life. Reeve, well, she's pissed. She's also ready to ruin lives in Seventh Virtue. If you didn't know, Reeve narrated books 1 to 6 of Fostered, so I know her pretty well. But now I finally gave her a platform and also superpowers in order for her to, get the revenge that she so gladly deserves. And then Lonan finally is becoming a bird in Seventh Virtue, so, his life isn't going all that well. In Feeding Habits, Harrison is still millennial panic, but like in all caps, like extreme millennial panic. So Lonan in Feeding Habits is trying to be a good person, but it's just so hard. How do you write character flaws? It's so easy, I think, and something that I fell into when I started writing more like morally gray characters, more characters who had more flaws than they had good things about them, to see flaws as like a psychological quirk. In reality, character flaws are often deeply ingrained. They affect the way that you see the world, your worldview. So if your character is flawed, how does that change the way that they interact with the world, with themselves, with others? It's a really deeply rooted thing. If you have a complex flaw, which most human flaws are quite complex, it's usually going to impact your life at the root rather than on the surface. You will see surface symptoms, but symptoms are always a part of like a larger issue. And that's how I would write a character flaw, looking at it as a deeply rooted issue. How do you create strong character relationships, especially in stories where the relationships drive key parts of the plot? I know that there's this really, really great post on Instagram. I believe Reedsy had posted it, and it was really great advice. And I was like, this is like the best advice. When you have two characters interacting, their interaction will serve a purpose, and don't repeat the purpose of an interaction multiple times. I will link the post because it was a lot better phrased in the post. I like that. I want to second it. I think you can always use your scene as a motivator to expose something new about a relationship. Also thinking about how your own relationships look like to others. So if you had to write out your relationship, like say with I have my twin sister. If I had to write down my relationship with my twin sister, what would that look like? It's easier, I think, when we can think about how we relate to our own relationships. It might be easier to apply how characters also interact with each other. Being a writer is strange because you basically have to birth characters and you have to get to know them at the same time because you're probably not necessarily writing with them since infancy. Because of that, you have a lot more to learn. It might be easier to be like, okay, my relationship with so-and-so looks like this. It's impacted because of this. And when you realize how your own relationships work, it can help you realize how a character's relationship might work. Treat fictional relationships as you would real ones. What's messy about it? What's good about it? Why is it like that? What was it like in the past? What could it be like in the future? Things like that. Which authors do you feel you emulate in your writing, consciously or not? So I wouldn't say I necessarily emulate these writers, but these are writers who have inspired me and whose work I sincerely appreciate. First one is Emma Cline. I will probably talk about Emma Cline later in this video. Emma Cline's Prose in the Girls is really important to my writing journey and becoming the writer that I am today. And also Eliza Robertson's work, absolutely phenomenal stuff. Eliza Robertson's micro attention to detail and image in particular is something that I really, really appreciated when I was first developing my literary style. Emma Cline's ability to rework language into very artistic, almost impressionistic paint strokes is something that I appreciate from her work. Also want to give a shout out to my friend Shaylin. Shaylin's work has influenced me for so long. If you didn't know, Shaylin has an authortube channel, which I will link because they're incredibly talented, so perceptive about craft, and also how that applies in actual writing. How has your writing evolved over the years? I think when I first started, my writing was very straightforward. It was very dialogue driven and also a lot more plot driven. There was a lot more conflict. I would have tons of subplots. That was when I was much younger. That was from about ages 12 to 15. And then from 16 to maybe even early 18, my writing transitioned to something a lot more image-based. It was super poetic, almost airy, kind of abstract. And now, which is more like late 18, 19, I'm almost 20, it's settled between the two. I now have a keen eye for detail, as well as atmosphere, language, image. I still have those strengths that I developed as I got into more poetic style, but I've also retained some of the more straightforward detail with a focus on character psychology in particular. So I now gravitate a lot more to simpler ideas that can really be more like character studies. So I don't really do any of the high concept stuff anymore. I don't write a lot of action or plot or subplots anymore. It's mostly character psychology, super internal. I've also branched out in terms of what I write. I now primarily, I guess, write short stories. I used to be a lot more prolific when it came to the novel. I'd write at least one a year, if not two. Now I write one every 16 months or so, but I do write a lot of short stories. This year I'm trying to write a short story every month, so I am pumping out short stories quite more frequently. I've also gotten into poetry, which influences the way that I craft prose as well. So I also think I have a lot more knowledge when it comes to writing, so my intent is usually a lot stronger than it once was. I feel like I have more control over my work, over the words that I choose. What's the biggest and most influencing experience that changed the way you write? I don't think I can name just one, because there are definitely, I think, moments in my life that have all culminated to become where I am. Every single day that I write, I learn something. Some of the main ones is actually hitting a novel length work. I was 13 at the time. I was in grade 8. I'd made a goal to write 40,000 words. And when I hit it, there was this like euphoria. I was like, I can do this. It really reinforced my confidence as a writer. I was like, okay, if I can hit 40,000 words now, I can hit higher word count later and I can keep writing. And that year I wrote over 600,000 words. And I've never been able to top that. I don't know what I was on when I was 13, but amen, Rachel. Good job for you. The next one is writing fostered, which made me realize that I do have the capability to invest and love characters on end for years and to feel like they are my own friends. And I think that that's really important in how I approach writing, seeing characters as people that impact me and that, I impact has been really important for me. And I would never have been able to do that without fostered. Another moment is reading The Girls by Emma Cline. We just mentioned Emma Cline. Really opened my eyes to how possible it is to use language like a fluid medium, almost like paint, rather than words, and keep it super stoic on the page. Emma Cline has this incredible poeticism to her language. She manages to stitch phrases together that are surprising. And a lot of the techniques that I learned from Emma's work, I still appreciate and I still include in my own work. But I never would have known that language had the capabilities to be pushed if I hadn't read that book. I knew that I was writing a literary style before I read The Girls by Emma Cline, but after I was like, this is what I've been doing the whole time, and now I understand how to do it a little bit more intentionally. One that's more recent is I read How to Pronounce Knife by Sivankam Damvangja, and it made me realize how simplicity can be just as powerful, just as complex as complexity. And now I certainly approach writing, particularly short fiction, in a different way since I read that book. What has helped you gain confidence in your writing? I don't think I was always a confident writer. I don't remember the day that I was like, okay, so I'm a really good writer and I'm confident in it. I think it's just honestly writing for a long time. I've been writing really consistently for almost a decade now. I didn't do anything in specific. I just practiced a lot, and the more I wrote, the more I felt that I was good. But it wasn't always like that. I mean, I wrote throughout all of my adolescence. So teenage years, probably the years where you're most insecure and you're developing the most and the most rapidly, or when you're a teenager. I think having that experience also helped a little bit. I also had a rapid change with my writing style. I think a lot of young writers could probably relate to that. Also understanding that writing is subjective. So if one person doesn't like it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. When it comes to learning to be confident, it's all in trusting yourself. Do you trust yourself in this moment to actually like love what you're doing. That's really where it came from for me with writing when I began to trust that judgment in myself. How did you find your writing style? So the boring answer, lots of practice. I wish I had a more helpful answer for this. The more you practice your art, the more you're going to understand what style you like. I don't think you can actually find your writing style if you don't put in the practice. I think that's the most boring answer, but it's all about practice. I really didn't find it any other way. How has your presence on YouTube as a creator affected your personal life? The person went on to add, every time I give someone writing advice or just small tips, some people say I'm not qualified enough because I'm not published. Do you deal with stuff like this also? So I want to deal with the second part of this question first because it's something that's really interesting and that I kind of have a really strong opinion about. Can you give writing advice if you're not qualified to do so? I actually think that anybody can give writing advice, and it's really on the consumer on the advice to interrogate whether or not it works for them. And let me elaborate. So the ideology that, let's say, you're giving writing advice, but I read your writing and I hate it, so your writing advice is null and void in my head. I think that ideology could really benefit from more critical thinking. If you like someone's advice and you use it in application of your own work and it works for you, I don't think it really matters how talented the person who gave it really is. Writing is all about your own practice, not somebody else's practice. Somebody else's practice wouldn't affect yours. How has your presence on YouTube as a creator affected your personal life? I'm a lot better at public speaking now. I think I'm a lot better at interacting with new people. I know when I'm on Zoom calls or when I was in my workshop, my sister who's in the same class with me, she'd be like, Rachel, you look straight at like your webcam when you're like talking to the workshop. And I realized it's because I'm a YouTuber. So I'm so used to like looking straight down at the camera. My presence as a creator has also allowed me to create an abundant community that I love so much and to also witness extreme passion about writing and craft on the internet, something that is incredibly inspiring. I also think that it has affected my life in some interesting ways as well. I think more so YouTube and the pandemic have influenced my life. This is a small one, but whenever I get ready or whenever I like do my hair or do my makeup, I always think, I need to film a video today because like I look good on that day. Does that happen to anybody else who is like a YouTuber where like if your hair looks nice that one day, you're like, I should film a video today. So sometimes every day I'm thinking I should film a video, I should film a video, I should film a video, and I can't really think of anything else. What are some things that have been hard on you because of this platform? And the person added, I think it would be nice to share those so that we as an audience could stay respectful, which is so kind. I really appreciate that. I think I just have a lot more anxiety with sharing things because there's a potential for judgment. You all know I'm an anxious person. I struggle with anxiety. So as my platform grows, this anxiety also increases. It becomes kind of scary to share things that are really personal to me, such as my projects, and particularly the project Fostered that I've been working on for so long that like it is a part of me. So if anybody commented on it or like the potential for people to comment on it, I'm nervous about that happening for sure. Though, I mean, nobody has like ever said anything negative about that series, which is incredibly kind. And then, you know, there's also the fear of making mistakes in the public eye. I'm not a perfect person. I'm also a young person. I'm barely 20. I have not turned 20 yet, but I'm almost there. So, you know, I have not lived on this planet for a long time. It definitely becomes nerve-wracking to make a mistake or worry if you did make a mistake, and you never want to hurt anybody. But as human beings, we evolved. Society also evolves. And so, man, like, did I make a mistake? I don't want to harm anybody. I do think that it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, I'm not gonna lie, to worry about how people are going to perceive you on the internet. I think another one is also talking myself out of writing things out of the increased fear of failure. Now when I write, sometimes it's like, what would my audience think about this? Or when I put this on YouTube or when I put this on my blog, are they gonna judge me for this? So I might actually back out of writing something before I even write it, which wasn't as much of a problem when I didn't have such a large audience. And my audience is still relatively small, but even then, as my blog has even grown, that has become a thing where it's been like, should I put this out there? I don't know. I'm kind of nervous. Oh, maybe I won't even write it in the first place. I think there's also a worry that people like hate my writing. I try to be like a super bad bitch and be like, I don't care if people don't like my writing because I like it, but it does definitely impact even the way I view my own writing. Knowing that somebody else saw it, I'm like, if I judge it first, then it won't hurt as much if somebody else judges it. So there's definitely that fear. I find myself coming up with very intense and abstract themes for stories, but I just cannot come up with a plot no matter how hard I try. All the events in my stories seem very mediocre and mundane. How do you come up with events that are unique to the story and leave an impact on the reader? Number one, you can certainly write story ideas that are mediocre and mundane. I love stories that are so boring in concept. The important thing about stories in my eyes are about the revelation a character holds. So, in my opinion, great short fiction is revelatory in some sort of sense. It doesn't have to be a big revelation. It can be pretty small, but it should indicate a change no matter what. Short fiction is pretty simple in that way, but it's also simultaneously difficult. It's kind of the Achilles heel of short fiction, that it should be revelatory no matter how small that revelation is. So it's a great thing. It also is the most difficult thing about it. How I like to look at this is what small thing can trigger your character in a huge way, but on a small scale when it comes to short fiction. So as long as you have that change, simple story ideas, they won't matter as much. An example that's coming to mind right now is Cathedral by Raymond Carver, which you could probably read online. It's a really simple story, but there's such intense character revelation that the simplicity becomes complexity. I'm sorry if that is not a very good answer. How do you create and maintain atmosphere? So language, environment, set of words that are all tonally similar. So word choice obviously is really important when it comes to atmosphere. The certain verbs you use, nouns, adjectives, the way you list those together really impacts the environment. Also thinking of unity of form and concept. Can you amplify the tone of your concept through the form? I also think it's images, what your character notices, what they don't notice. Weather is really important as well. How do you make a setting into a character of its own? So number one, you don't necessarily have to. I think this really depends on the kind of story you want to write. But if you do want to, how does the setting affect the characters within it? And how do the characters affect the setting? Do they push and pull? Do they have a relationship? Does one exacerbate the other one? Does one mirror emotions of characters, like pathetic fallacy, for example? So I like to think of tension and conflict here. So we know stuff is at risk for the characters, but what is also at risk for the setting too? And if the setting is at risk, how does that further risk the characters? So that's something you can think of. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, I really appreciate all of the love and support I've gotten on this channel. I cannot believe we've reached 4,000 subscribers. I can't even fathom how many people 4,000 people are. I don't even know like 20 people. I'm so in awe and so grateful of this beautiful community that we've managed to create on this channel. I appreciate all of the support that you give me for projects that I didn't even think anybody would be interested in. And also me in general, I didn't think anyone would be interested in me and what I'm up to. But I always get the loveliest comments and messages from you, and your support is so appreciated by me. I just want to thank you again for watching this video, for being here. I will see you in another one. Bye.